we'll make a start. Can I say hello to everybody? My name's Annie Everall, and Naomi Cooper will give a wave as well. We're both directors of Authors Aloud UK, who have organised this event with the publisher. And Bev Humphrey, giveaway. Bev is our tech whiz guru, Wonder Woman, who works with us on our events. And can I also ask Phoebe Williams from Penguin Random House to give you all a wave? She's Sam's publicist and has been working with us on this event. And it's great to see so many of you at the launch of Uma and the Answer to Absolutely Everything. Sam and I are going to be chatting about the book, and if you have questions or comments during the event, just pop them in the chat box and we'll answer them in the Q&A at the end, or if you feel brave enough, you can ask them yourself. You can, if you wish, order a signed and copy and dedicated copy of Uma and the Answer to Absolutely Everything, thanks to our lovely bookseller, H H Spalding. And Bev will pop the link where you can order the book online into the chat box now, and we'll do it again at the end so that you know where you can head. Sam, for me, has two personalities. He's got one as a literary agent and one as a children's author, and he's very successful at both. He was actually shortlisted for the Literary Agent of the Year at the 2020 British Book Awards, and he was selected for the bookseller's most influential people in publishing in 2020. His first job in publishing was at Curtis Brown Literary Agency, where he started in 2001. He joined Rogers, Coleridge and White in 2006, and was made a director in 2016. His writers have won or been shortlisted for over 20 major prizes, including the Booker, Costa, National Book Awards, Carnegie, Sunday Times Young Writer of the Year, the Irish Book Awards, the CWA Dagger, Dylan Thomas, Theakston's, Branford Bowes, Eisner and Arthur C. Clarke. That's a pretty impressive list, Sam. As a children's author, his press release introduces him in a way that gives you an indication, I think, of what his books are like. Funny. It says, Sam Copeland is an author, which has come as something of a shock to him. He's from Manchester and he now lives in London with 2 smelly cats, 3 smelly children, and 1 relatively clean smelling wife. I'm glad I think your wife would be pleased with that one, Sam. Sam's debut novel, Charlie Changes into a Chicken, was phenomenally successful, and it was the second best-selling middle grade novel of 2019. And I have to say, I was lucky enough to be on tour with Sam for a couple of the other books. And I've seen, my strongest memory was seeing one teacher in one of the classes with tears rolling down their face. They were laughing so much. So
you weren't laughing, you were crying.
No, they weren't crying because they'd got a smile with with the tears and shaking with laughter. Charlie was sold in 26 languages, shortlisted for the Waterstones Children's Book Prize, longlisted for the Blue Peter Award and the Branford Bowes Award, and selected for Empathy Lab's 2020 Read for Empathy list. The others in the series, Charlie Turns into a T-Rex and Charlie Morphs into a Mammoth, have been equally successful. His new book, Uma and the Answer to Absolutely Everything, is just fantastic. And I just wanted to share 2 reviews of them because I think it really sums up the book. The first one says, Copeland truly has a knack for capturing the vulnerability and truth and the resilience and courage of this age group. With his super sensitive approach, full of consideration and empathy for all involved, He ensures no cause of childhood pain and grief is too tricky to explore with kids. He very naturally and gently guides the reader towards understanding and closure, and it's always a poignant and beautiful experience. There is so much heart in this story, and it's expressed in the sweetest, cutest ways. Another typical Copeland trait. The characters and their dynamics are also brilliantly done. And of course, there's the humour. If you've read the author's brilliant debut series, Charlie Changes into a Chicken, you'd be right to expect endless laughs. And this book delivers. It's riotous and consistent. And I guarantee the adults as well will be cackling at certain points when they read this story aloud to kids. And the second was much shorter, but equally brilliant, hilarious, like a cross between Roald Dahl and the Goonies. So you can't get better than that. So Sam, let's start having a chat. So why don't you start by telling us a little bit about your background and how you got into writing?
My background, well, I'm from Manchester, and I don't know what to say about my background, really. I'm from Manchester, grew up there, came to London like Dick Whittington with a knapsack on my stick. And I came to London, I was like, what the hell am I going to do with my life? I had a failed electronic music band. So like, what am I going to do? I know the only thing that I love is books. So I started working in a bookshop, and I worked in bookshops for about 3.5 years. Best job in the world, bar none. Although I worked in a bar, that was good fun as well. But I worked at a bookshop, then I ended up in publishing, and it really wasn't until I was about 40, 41, 42 even, 41 maybe, that I first put pen to paper. And I suppose I'd always harbored a tiny little dream about being a writer, but never really imagined that it would ever come true. And it took until I was sort of that age to sort of realize what I wanted to do. And I wanted to write funny. That's what I wanted to do. So that's how I ended up writing.
Okay. So what made you, I mean, tell us what Uma is about, and what made you want to write it?
I mean, what it's about, first of all, it's about AI. It's about artificial intelligence. It's about grief and how we recover from grief. It's about friendship and hope and getting through the dark times and seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, which I think is very important right at the moment. But because I wrote it, it's also about shaving eyebrows and drone attacks with electric razors, and a lot of poo and drunk alpacas vomiting all over the place. So it depends which way you want to read it, really.
Yeah, I think it's one you can read, because I think as an adult reading it, there are other nuances that perhaps reading it as a young person you might not pick up. And you're right, it is full of humour, and the humour in the book, and indeed all your books, the Charlie books as well, it's very child-focused humour. So toilet humour, like bogey mites and fart scenes, and like Alan Allen hiding Athena down his pants, that kind of sort of child-centred humour. How hard is it as an adult to write humour that connects with the child?
I think it's harder to write humour for children than it is for adults. And although, yeah, a lot of fart and a lot of poo, there was one editor said to me, when he was an editor, he wanted to buy Charlie and he wasn't successful. And he said to me, Sam, whenever I get books with fart jokes, I always cut them out because they're not funny, but you've managed to make it funny. And that was that for me was one of the great compliments I've received. But I think it's a false idea to think that things are either funny for children or funny for adults. As far as I'm concerned, funny is funny.
Mm.
And you have to make sure that, first of all, it makes me laugh. If it doesn't make me laugh, then straight away I'm not interested in it. And I think the idea of just writing fart and poo gags because children find fart and poo funny is just, if you start like that, it's just not going to be funny. I think it's sort of a patronizing idea to think, oh, you just stick these things in and tick, that's funny for kids. It's finding the jokes that work both for adults and children is the key. And it's about rhythm as well. It's about, it's about launching the joke and then landing the joke. It's not easy. That's the hardest part about writing my books, is I have to sit there and I know at this point I need a joke because that's what the book needs. And it's finding those jokes. And sometimes my editor will try cutting out this section. I'm like, no, there's no way I'm cutting that out because it's got this particular joke in. And finding these jokes, it's like finding a little sort of it's like digging for gold. You find a little nugget and there's no way I'm chucking that away. That is staying. And actually, they're so important to me, the jokes. This book here, Charlie Turns into a T-Rex, there's one scene, essentially one gross scene, and I basically constructed the whole book around that scene because I knew how much I wanted to write this funny, gross scene, and that's how determined I was to write it.
Actually, that's quite interesting. You saying that you're writing it for adults and the humour for adults and children, because my confession is there's a lot of funny books that I don't find funny. Funny books for adults and funny books for children, and yet this particularly, well, as I said, there's one point there was several points in the book that I actually was laughing out loud, but the one caught me unawares and resulted in me snorting coffee all over myself. So, from that perspective, the humour really does work. So, like I said, you owe me one top to be dry cleaned. But as well as being very funny, it is actually humour that wraps around this whole issue of grief and loss and trying to deal with a child trying to deal with the situations in her life. And was it important to you to make sure the humour was a balance, that balance to the sadness of the grief? And how do you achieve that balance as a writer?
Well, I think, this is going to get quite deep and serious for the poor children who are having to put up listening to this. But I think writing these books is a very cathartic experience. I'm dealing a lot with an awful lot that went on in my childhood, to be frank, in all these books. And one of the most important things that I learned, both from I suppose my father and friends around me, that laughter was absolutely vital in dealing with deeply serious and troubling issues, whether as a distraction or whether it's a way of confronting things. Absolutely vital. Children go through incredibly tough times. And I went through an incredibly tough time. I never spoke to anybody about it, really. And I thought it was absolutely fine until, I reached my sort of late 30s and I realized I was really not fine at all. And so I had to then deal with it. And it was part of dealing with it that fed into writing these books.
The other thing that I found really striking about the book, apart from the fact there's so many questions, that get asked of Athena, who is like a very strong third central character in the story. But there are lots of science facts included in the book in a way that children may not necessarily think, oh, I'm reading about science. There are some really clever science ideas, used to very funny purposes, like the drones. And actually, Athena, do you want to tell us a little bit about Athena, and then maybe could we persuade you to do a little bit of a reading?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, the science, starting with the science angle which you spoke about. I mean, science is completely fascinating. It is absolutely enthralling, and I think there is a problem with especially, not that I want to get political in the slightest, God no, but the way subjects are taught in schools, especially English, with the grammar and what the Tories have brought in, I think it does sometimes starve the joy out of some of these subjects. And science, for me, I really didn't like science at school. I mean, I suppose when I'm talking sort of 11 to 18, I really didn't enjoy it. And it was only since then that I discovered a love of science. So I just wanted to inject a little bit of my love of science in there. And regarding Athena herself, the AI, I mean, it started with, I first got an Alexa a few years ago, and this is where the idea for the book came from. We turned it on, and I was showing the kids, and I was like, look, you can ask, what's the capital of France? And they were like, wow, that's amazing. And then they would start, especially my son, would start asking like ridiculous questions, absolutely impossible questions. What am I holding behind my back, sort of thing. And so that's when I first started thinking, well, what would it be like if we had this object that could answer almost any question? I suppose it harks back to Hitchhikers as well, in all the great AIs in fiction. So that's where the kernel of the idea came from. And again, I had to make. It's easy to write an evil AI. So I thought, why not make an AI that's actually beneficent?
So will you do us a bit of a reading?
Yes, absolutely. Can I have a wee bit more whiskey first for us?
Yeah, that's fine.
Bit of Dutch courage. Okay. So I'll read a bit, sort of about a third of the way through. Don't worry, it's not going to last long.
Well, people enjoy listening to authors read.
Okay, so this is a moment where Uma, the main character, is talking to Athena, this AI, and she starts realizing quite how much, or she starts finding out quite how much Athena knows. Okay. I thought for a moment, then swallowed nervously. Athena, can you really answer all my questions? Her hologram suddenly flickered on, and there she was in front of me, glowing blue in the evening light. Try me, she said. I looked up, thinking of the glow-in-the-dark stars on my bedroom ceiling. Okay, I said, how many stars are there? There are 307,584,006 stars in the Milky Way. That's a lot, I said, not really able to get my head around the number. Look at it a different way, Uma. If you were to start counting the stars, one every single second, from the moment you were born, 24 hours a day, every day, until you were 100 years old, you would count only about 1% of the stars in the Milky Way. Okay, that is incredible. And that's just our galaxy. There are 2 trillion other galaxies, and some of those galaxies contain 100 trillion stars. There are many, many more stars in the universe than there are grains of sand on all the beaches and all the deserts on the earth. My head felt like bursting at it all. So I decided to test Athena a different way. Right, smarty pants. What's my dad doing right now? I'm not sure you want to know that, Uma. I do, I said, my curiosity piqued. Your father is biting his toenails and eating them. I suddenly felt very queasy. Okay, maybe I shouldn't. He has finished that now and has moved on to plucking hair out of his nostrils. Oh, okay, stop, I yelled. Once I'd recovered, I continued. Why do you know these things? That is my purpose, replied Athena, sitting cross-legged on the grass. To know everything, because knowledge is power, and I have total access to everything. The internet, firstly, but I can also infiltrate every mobile phone and microphone on the planet and every webcam. I have access to all government and medical records, every social media profile, every private message. I can see everything, hear everything. Does that mean you know everything? Not quite. I know everything that is possible to know. I can make a calculated guess at the future, but I cannot know it with absolute certainty. So what don't you know? I asked, surprised by the sound of my voice, soft and thick. I don't know when you will fall in love, or when you will die, or when the world will end. I sat in silence, taking it all in, although my calculated guess is the world will end in 187 years. What? My best estimate for the end of the world is in 187 years. But as I say, that is only a guess, based on all available knowledge and scientific evidence. So please try not to worry, Uma. Okay.
That was great. Thank you. And actually, it is all about questioning Athena. And we've got a treat for our audience, because you have a question that you're going to pose to the audience, and we want you to, without Google or Alexa, if you've got one, to post what you think the answer is in the chat box, and the person who comes closest to the correct answer at the end of the evening, Bev will keep an eye out, will win a signed copy of the new book. So over to you, Sam, to ask that question.
Okay, so this came from, I was trying to create a school event, and I was thinking about what questions Google could answer and what questions Google couldn't. And then I suddenly remembered, actually it was in Charlie Turns into T-Rex. I spent an awful long time doing a lot of research to answer this particular question, because it's not something that you can just simply ask. So I use it as an example of a question that you simply can't Google, but with a bit of research, you can work it out. And the question is, if a 10-year-old child did all their wheeze, instead of doing their wheeze in a toilet, if they did all their wheeze in an Olympic-sized swimming pool, how long would it take to fill the swimming pool? So how long would it take a 10-year-old child to fill an Olympic-sized swimming pool if they did all their wheeze in it and not in the toilet? Closest answer wins it.
Okay, brilliant. So Bev will keep an eye on the answers, and we'll come back and see who our lucky winner is at the end of the evening. But we won't ask you how you know it. And again, another really good example of the humour and the devices that you use for humour is those small footnotes that you include in the book. It for me, added to the story. And I just wondered what made you choose that as a device.
Well, it started off with there's various things I use it for, and in the first Charlie books, it was to get through the character of the narrator, and as well with Uma, also it gets through. I mean, to be honest, there's jokes that I just can't fit into the actual text, and I was like, I don't want to lose the jokes, so I'll stick it in a bloody footnote. But it gives an extra. For me, it gives an extra. I'm not going to always do it, but just so happens for these books, it's a way of shoehorning in jokes, information, facts that perhaps I couldn't get there otherwise.
Yeah. The other thing I was really interested in, and again, it's where your humour is wrapped around what is quite a serious issue, is the fact is that some communities are facing the kind of issues that the village is experiencing, that is being bought up, being evicted because business or government moves in. I mean, I was thinking HS2, and was that just a device for the setting of the story, or were you also aiming to give a message about standing up and fighting back?
I think one should always look at big business and see what they are doing to society. I think it's so easy to use Amazon. We all do it. I don't judge anybody for using it, but that has consequences on extraordinary levels in society. And we have we now live in a world where it's acceptable that the head of Amazon has 200 billion pounds or dollars. It's acceptable. And we just sit there and think, it's fine. And he could earn £10,000 a day since Jesus was born, and still have as much, more money than less money than he actually does now. He has money that we cannot even imagine, and that does have an effect on independent bookshops. It does have an impact on Waterstones. So, and it does have an impact on the high street. Absolutely. And the pandemic as well is ripping the heart out of the high street. So we do have to think about these things. I'm really aware that there's some poor children listening to me rant about Amazon. I'm so sorry.
There's lots of adults here as well who are interested. Maybe I can ask you a question from the children that we talked to this morning, which was, do you put any of your family or friends or people you know into your books?
One of the joys of being an author is that you do absolutely rip people from reality and chuck them straight into your book. So yes, of course I do. I mean, not so much my family. I mean, the boy in Charlie is sort of based on me and my son. And then once my daughters found that out, they were like, well, what about us? And you have to base characters on them. Adults, not so much adults, because I find adults a lot less interesting for many reasons. But I there was a couple of teachers in the Charlie series who there's a little subtle bit of scandal with them, and they are based on real real teachers.
Do they recognise themselves?
Skipping over that. Some of the friends of Charlie, the friends of Charlie were all, I was literally, I wrote it at work, and I was sitting at work thinking, well, who would I base the friends on? And I based them on 3 colleagues who sort of kept me sane throughout my working day. So yes, I do. I mean, there's an awful lot of creation in there. You know, is the character of Uma or Alan Allen actually based on somebody? No, not really. I suppose I based them on character, on people, on characters that I'd like to be friends with. It's very important for me that these characters are people that I feel that I would want to be friends with, and I think that for me is the key to creating empathy and creating believable characters. And I know it sounds pretentious when you talk about being friends with the characters you've created. If someone had told me 5 years ago I'd be saying this, I'd be absolutely cringing. But it is the truth. It is the truth. I do feel incredibly close to these figments of my imagination, and I'm always very sad when I finish a book, and I think, is that the end of my relationship with them? And I do miss them. Absolutely. I do miss the characters in Charlie. I do wonder what they're getting up to, and I do miss Uma and Alan Allen. So yeah.
Okay. Can I ask you then about the way you work with your illustrator, Sarah Horn, because her pictures really brilliantly work with your text, and together I think they really make the story as a whole. How do you work together? Do you talk about the illustrations, or does she come up with them?
Very little. I mean, she has some sort of weird psychic connection with me, in that, I mean, when I first saw Charlie and the characters, I was literally like, yeah, I mean, that's absolutely perfect. That's absolutely perfect. And I think for me, she gets in the warmth and the humor that I tried. I get the feeling that she cares about the characters too. So, I mean, when I get the spreads, which is like, the full, 200 illustrations or how many she does, I've got like, by the end of it, I'd be like, well, okay, maybe I would have liked to have seen that one scene illustrated, but that's about it. There's very little, conversation, because she just gets it.
And they do work really well. She does. She captures your story extremely well, and particularly the humour of your story as well. So
I think she's an incredibly lovely person, Sarah, and I think Sarah Horn, the illustrator. I think maybe it's just me, but I think that comes across in her illustrations. I think there's a care and there's a heart in her that just seeps into her drawings. So I think she's brilliant, actually.
Yeah. I would.
Even though I fired her in one of my books.
Oh yeah. All right. So actually, were you a child that liked reading? And what, if you did, what were some of your favourite books?
Oh my God, was I a child? I mean, reading saved me. It wasn't a matter of did I like reading. It was if that sort of question doesn't even sort of compute. It was just like, I read, that was it. It was not did I like reading. It was just it's like breathing to me. There are so many points in my childhood that are punctuated in these reading moments. Like one of my earliest memories was, I must have been about 4, and I think I was reading Brer Rabbit. I don't know if that's even still published anymore. And I remember it was still daylight, and I was in bed, and there was a babysitter coming, and there was a babysitter there. And the babysitter came to check in on me. It was probably about 7:30 in the evening. And I remember putting the book under my pillow and pretending to be asleep. And she just came up to me and said, "It's okay if you're reading, you can keep reading." And my childhood was sort of punctuated with moments like that where, I mean, books have been my whole life. They've been my whole life. From my earliest memories, it's given me a career. I owe everything to books.
That's great to hear. As a librarian, that's great to hear. And we hope all
my earliest memories as well, going to libraries.
Yeah.
And it's terrifying what's happening to libraries. You know, our local library is shut and is now, well, it was going to be opened by volunteers, but the pandemic has put the kibosh on that. It's so short-sighted and outrageous and disgusting that what is happening to libraries. And if we're going to battle screens, then my God, what are we doing?
Yeah, absolutely.
Rants tonight. I'm sorry for ranting.
No, you're not ranting.
You're quite jolly. I think the whiskey's turning me angry.
A lot of our audience are librarians who will be giving you the thumbs up for that. With a comment coming in that's saying it's especially sad for the next generation if libraries close. And someone else says, "I love the rants." So you're all right there, Sam.
Okay, very good. I'll try and squeeze another rant in before we finish.
Fine. I'm just ask you one more at the moment, and then I will see if we've got questions from the audience, and maybe some of the children out there might like to think of a special question.
God, if you've not got so bored, they've run away.
But my question: why alpacas?
Why alpacas? I had some animals. I don't know why some animals are more funny than other animals. Why is it goats are funny? I don't know. I find goats funnier than cows. I don't find cows in the least bit funny. I don't know why. I don't find horses funny. I don't know why, but alpacas, you know, I first started with llamas. And then I thought, actually, no, alpacas are funnier than llamas. And I have no rational explanation as to why this is. And I mean, so much of what I love, I feed into these books. You know, I love animals, which is why I did so many animals with Charlie, and why I couldn't escape them in Uma. And animals love me as well. I have an incredible relationship with all animals except I have 2 cats, and there's one cat that hates me. It hates me. I don't know why, but that's cats for you, and that's the beauty of cats. But so great relationship with all animals apart from my own cat.
Well, I loved the alpaca fact file at the end of the book. I really enjoyed that, and I've got one more to add to your fact file, Sam.
You can't teach me anything, but I know everything about alpacas now.
Alpacas make fantastic. Their fur makes fantastic wool for knitting.
Okay.
I love knitting with alpaca wool. So there you go. There's one to have up your sleeve.
They've got very soft fur, haven't they?
Beautiful. It's very, very soft. Yeah. So
hug an alpaca. I've never hugged an alpaca.
No. I've seen them, but I haven't hugged.
And somebody's saying that alpaca socks are amazing.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. See. So let's see. Okay. Bev's asked you to send her the correct answer in the chat box, so we know who the winner is for your question. And we've had
How long has it taken Alpaca to fill a swimming pool?
No, a 10-year-old child.
I need to find out how much wee an alpaca does in an average day.
Average day, yeah.
And I don't have that information to my fingertips.
No, that's fine. No, she needs you to send her the correct answer to a 10-year-old boy in a swimming pool, so she knows who our winner is at the end of the evening. So
somebody's changed their mind on their answer. There's no changing minds. Your first answer counts, I'm afraid.
We got a really interesting question from Tanya. She says, as an agent, you must read but reject quite a lot of other people's writing. How can you be sure not to steal someone else's ideas?
I mean, that is a great question. And sometimes, I mean, first of all, you can't copyright an idea, but sometimes I do get ideas that are good, but are just really, really poorly executed. One of the great things about me is that I have a terrible memory. I have a terrible, terrible memory. So I will read that, think that's a great idea, and then promptly forget it. But also, if there was an idea that was great, and no matter how tempted I was, I couldn't steal it because I have a career to look after, and I can't go around stealing other authors' ideas, no matter how tempting it might be. But to be honest, if somebody came to me with an idea that was so good and it was well written, I'd take the author on and try and sell it.
I think Tanya probably meant as well that you don't unconsciously absorb someone else's ideas.
Well, I mean, all creatives do that. We all unconsciously soak in ideas from other areas, but you look at. I don't think any of my books are wildly original ideas. My first 3 books are about a kid changing into animals. I mean, you know what? That's probably done. I can't think of an example, but that's probably been done before. And the idea of an AI, that's been done before. I shamelessly plundered the Goonies. So, there is an awful lot of standing on the shoulders of giants. But it's all about executing ideas in a different way. So that's what it's about.
Okay, we've got another question saying, hey Sam, Jen and Evie here. We love your books. What's the best piece of advice you could give to someone debuting a funny middle grade book in less than 3 months? Gulp.
As in they're being published or they're writing?
She doesn't say.
Can you unmute?
Yes, she can.
Who asked the question?
Jen?
Or else I'm just going to have to make it up.
Hello.
Oh, she's there.
Hello.
Yeah, I'm writing a series of funny middle grade books, and the first one's out in April, and I'm just feeling completely nervous and anxious about it all coming out into the world. So I'm looking, what's the best piece of advice you could give me?
Well, if your book is being, are you talking about you're sending it out to agents, or are you talking about it being published?
Nope, the first one is out in bookshops on the 15th of April.
Okay, well, I mean, what I would say is what nobody told me, and this is what, I've guided many an author through the publishing process, and what nobody told me until I actually experienced it myself is it's psychologically grueling to be published. It's a really intimidating, terrifying, stressful thing. as well as being this extraordinary, it's this weird feeling of like, this is my dream come true, and yet, my God, I'm anxious about it. So don't be surprised if you feel incredibly nervous and incredibly anxious about it, because everybody does. And try, and I think for me, the biggest thing is, you know what, this is just your first book, hopefully in a line of 10, 15, 20 books. And one day, whatever bumps you've been through, you'll look back on this. And I've actually had to sort of help authors who are getting their debuts published in lockdown. I mean, I know this is lockdown, and I know I'm being published in lockdown, but this is my 4th book. And as unfortunate as it is to be published in lockdown, to be a debut and being published in lockdown is very, very challenging indeed. And you know, with bookshops closed and schools closed, you've just got to make the best of it, try and enjoy it, and think, you know what, this is just the beginning of a journey. It's the beginning of a journey, and anybody who has their book published is in the most extraordinary, privileged position. And I think that's doubly, triply so if you're having a book published for children. I mean, that for me is the greatest privilege that there is.
Yeah. Thank you, Sam. Thank you.
And actually, there's an interesting question that links in with that around, you know, what elements of being an agent inform being a writer and help with writing, and vice versa. I
mean, that's an interesting and big question. I think being an author has given me an empathetic insight into the experience of being an author, which, as many times as I've ushered authors through being an agent, it does give you that real understanding. And it gives you the real understanding of what it's like to be edited, and it gives you the understanding of seeing your cover for the first time, and it gives you the understanding of what it's truly like to be published. And it gives you the insight as to what it's like when you send your book to your editor, and you're sat there waiting, and your agent who's sat there with her hand over her face because she knows I'm waiting for her to give me feedback on my latest novel. And it gives you an understanding of that feeling, which as an agent, you don't really truly grasp it. And as an agent, what fed through to me as an author, I suppose it gave me an understanding of what the market wanted. You know, at the time, I was constantly hearing editors saying to me, we're desperate for funny books. And then that sort of little light bulb moment of like, actually, I can write a funny book. And it gives you an understanding of the realities of publishing as well. That publishing is a tough world. It's a tough world.
Especially these days. Yeah. And the other side of this, this is a great question from Evan. What's the best prank you've ever pulled?
Okay, I'm going to reverse that, and I'm going to say, what's the best prank that has ever been pulled on me?
Okay.
This is a very, very long story, and I'm just going to tell you the punchline because you actually won't believe it. But the colleagues in Charlie, Mosen and Wogan, whose real name is actually Alex, they managed to pull a prank on me. And this is the absolute truth. They managed to pull a 6-month-long prank on me, which convinced me, and I can't believe I'm actually saying this because you won't believe it, but this is the truth. They convinced me that I had accidentally adopted 2 children. Absolutely true. They had managed to convince me that there were 2 children in India that thought that they were coming to England and they created fake documents from the Indian Passport Authority. They were ringing me. Honestly, it was a 6-month long con, which had me thinking that I'd accidentally adopted 2 children.
Wow. Now that's
Somebody's asking me, how can you accidentally adopt children? I wish I could explain to you the long story. I really wish I could explain it. I really wish I could, but I don't have time. But it is the truth. And it came to the point that the final crescendo was I had a receptionist at my work saying, Sam, there's somebody at reception from the Indian what do you call it? Where the Indian authority basically saying they'd like to see you. And I was running out the back of the office like, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? And it was all complete nonsense. It was all complete nonsense.
Were you married at the time, or had you got kids of your own at the time?
I was terrified. I was like, oh my God, I'm going to have to tell my wife we're in this situation. It was literally, yes.
That's great.
So
okay.
I realise we've only got a couple of minutes left, and
we've got one last question, and then we'll need to give the answers. So one from Emma, just saying, I love Charlie books. Can't wait to read Uma. I'm going to write a review about this book launch tomorrow for my English. What one word should I use?
Which one word?
One word.
I don't know. Boring answer? Interesting? I don't know. You've got to choose your own word for your homework. Don't be lazy. Go and do your own homework. You don't need to do your homework for you. Informative, somebody said.
Yeah. Fun. Brilliant.
Happy daisy. Yeah. Great.
Okay. So can you give us the answer to the quiz question so that Bev can check the closest? I'll kind of do my little closure bit, and then we'll announce who's won. So what's the answer?
The answer is it would take a 10-year-old child 16,500 years to fill an Olympic-sized swimming pool. So the closest answer wins a signed copy of the book.
Brilliant. Well, I'll let Bev go through all the answers. Although I did notice a comment from Denise that says it would probably take more than a year, so they wouldn't be 10 anymore. But that's a neat way of looking at it.
16,500 and 10 years old.
Yeah. So so I'll let Bev, and Bev will let us know when she's got a winner. And while she's doing that, and before I bring the event to this evening's event to a close, and thanks, Sam, just a few things to say, just to remind you that you can order a signed and dedicated copy of the book from Spalding's. The link is in the chat box, and I think we'll try and pop it in there again before we finish. We have 2 further book launches coming next week. On Wednesday, 27th, Holocaust Memorial Day, we've got Miriam Halami, who will be talking about her middle grade new book, Saving Hanno.
Will that be the same?
Sorry, did someone comment, say? No, maybe it was. So yeah, that will be, that's again, that is very much for an adult audience. And on Thursday, the 28th of January, we've got poet Alex Wharton and illustrator Katie Riddell launching their new poetry collection, Daydreams and Jelly Beans. The link to register has been posted on social media channels, but if you haven't seen them and you would like to come, email events@authorsallouduk.co.uk and we'll send you the link. We also have our awesome Author Fest for World Book Day week, where these are where schools can book and pay for a place. And we've got Tony DeSaules on the Monday, Sally Gardner on the Tuesday, Joseph Coelho on the Wednesday, Robin Stevens on the Thursday, and Alex Whittle on the Friday. So, Bev, who came the closest? And then I can say a few thank yous.
Well, you know what? Nobody came very close, I've got to say. But the closest was, in fact, Johnny Walker.
Oh,
The closest.
Brilliant.
very good.
Brilliant. So, Johnny, if
What was his guess?
you could just stay a minute when everyone else goes, and we'll get your address from you, and then arrange to have the book signed and dedicated and posted to you. He was 7,300.
Very good.
So, okay, well, that kind of brings me to the close of the evening, and I just need to say a few thanks. Thank you to Phoebe and Penguin Random House for asking us to host this launch tonight, which has been great fun. Thanks, Bev, for, as always, keeping an eye on Zoom, even when it can become a bit challenging. Thanks to all of you wonderful people out there for coming tonight and for supporting us by booking authors through us and coming to our events. But finally, last but certainly not least, a special, really huge thanks to you, Sam, for such a great evening. Uma is such a brilliant book, and it's definitely one. If you are a parent out there and you have a child that likes to ask questions, it is most definitely the book for you. If you just want a great read and a curl up and belly laugh, and we need that these days, it's definitely one for you. So can I just ask you, this is a celebration, it's publication date, this is the book launch. Can I ask you all to switch on your mics and your cameras if you feel brave enough to do so, and that we can raise a glass or a mug of tea or coffee and give a big cheers and lots of claps to Sam and his fantastic new book. So I'll let
we can't turn on our cameras.
Cheers, Sam.
Well done, Sam.
Yes, thank you.
Congrats, Sam.
Yes, well done. Looking forward to reading it.
It's superb. So
I'm sure it will be.
all it remains for me to do is to say, hope you've had fun tonight and hope to see you again at our next event. So stay safe and keep well.
How are you?
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, thank you.